Hello, everybody, and good afternoon. Very lovely to see everybody. People are beginning now to log on, which is great. This is the next in our series of webinars based around digital well-being and cultures around new digital trends. And we're talking about leadership today. So, fellow speakers, do you want to turn your cameras on, please, so we can all sort of see you and say hello? Um, I sort of basically Google searched leadership before the webinar, and this is what I came up with. So I hope Dominic agrees with it. For a workplace to be healthy, productive, and consistent, quality leadership skills from managers and team leaders are a must. A job isn't just about getting the work done. In the modern workplace, it's just as much about working in collaboration with others, from understanding perspectives and managing conflicts to building working relationships and quality teams. So I thought that was quite interesting, and they came up with 10. Thank you, Alan. They came up with 10 points. Okay, inspiring motivation. For a leader to be successful, they must motivate those around them to achieve more, go the extra mile, and do better in their work. Communication. Leaders need first-rate communication skills. Positivity, delegation. Now that's what I need training on. Creativity, trustworthiness, responsibility, time management, influence, and decisiveness. So we have our panel of experts who hopefully will be sort of covering some of those points. So first up, I'd like to introduce to Dominic Turnbull from the McLane Group. And I also Googled the McLane Group. It's a consultancy specializing in people transformation and breakthrough performance. They work with leaders and teams in some of the world's top organizations, delivering company-wide and personalized executive coaching. Dominic, over to you.
Thank you, Sally. Pleasure to be here. And yeah, I couldn't agree with that. We don't need that slide just yet, the slide that's just gone up. Thank you. Yeah, I couldn't disagree with your shopping list. And yeah, there's many aspects to leading or leadership. And I just want to cover a couple of today. There's many books been written about leadership, and of all the ones that, and you'd be pleased to know I'm not going to give you a lot of theory today. In fact, I'm going to tell you a story, which hopefully will be enjoyable. One that you've probably all heard of before, actually. Anyway, before we get to the story, just a short thing on theory. Most books and leadership models point to three things when it comes to leadership. The first thing is something about defining, designing the future, an ambition, having a vision. Secondly, the ability to take people in a collaborative way towards that future. And then thirdly, you've got to make stuff happen along the way. So you've got to deliver. Most leadership models point to those three things in some shape or form. And the story I'm going to tell you today is about a leader who was pretty good at the first and the third, but needed some help on the second. And it's this specific aspect of leading that I just want to talk about today. Now, this leader in question, you've all heard of him. And to prove that leadership has been a challenge for many, many years, this guy existed about 1,500 years ago. And his name, familiar to you all, was King Arthur. Now, the 5th century United Kingdom as we know it today, back then, was a place called Old England. And Old England was made up of a number of areas of land, all fighting with each other. And in charge of each area of land was a knight. And being king, Arthur was in charge of this lot. And it was a bit of a mess. He inherited this mess from his father, Uther Pendragon, those people who are interested. He stepped down and King Arthur, as a young boy, took over the throne. And he decided he wanted to run a very different kingdom. So he did the first task of leading, which was to define an ambition. And the ambition was very simply the United Kingdom. That's what he wanted. But he then went about trying to lead remotely, something we've probably all been experiencing over the last 12 months. So we've all experienced the same kind of challenges that Arthur had. And the way he did that was he just got his servants and sent them out across the land and got them to tell the knights what the new story in town was, i.e. the United Kingdom. Well, they either got their heads chopped off or were sent back in bits and pieces. So that didn't work. So he then decided to try and get everyone and do like a village town hall meeting. Well, not many people turned up. So this reality of a fractious kind of kingdom was the reality. So he was at the point of giving up and just living with the reality when he decided to go for a walk just to clear his heads. And he was wandering through the woods, and all of a sudden from behind a tree out stepped a very wise looking man. No, it wasn't Alan Rides, just to make that point. It was Merlin, a name you're all probably familiar with. And Merlin said to Arthur, "Good morning, Arthur, how are you?" And Arthur looked at him and said, "Well, who are you and how do you know my name?" And Merlin said to him, "Well, I know a lot about you, Arthur. I know you want to unite the kingdom and I know you're struggling and I'm here to help you." So Arthur said, "Okay, well, tell me more." He said, "Well, come back to my place and I'll explain." So he went back to Merlin's place, whatever he lived in the 5th century, and the breakfast table was already set for 2 places. And Merlin said, "Welcome." And Arthur said, "Well, how did you know we were going to have breakfast?" And Merlin said, "Well, it was where I was born. I was born in the future and I'm currently living my life backwards. So I knew we were going to meet today. And I also know that you want to unite the kingdom." So Arthur said to him, "Well, that's incredible. So how can you help me? Why don't you tell me how to unite the kingdom?" And Merlin said to him, "Well, I think you want to be the best leader you can be." And Arthur said, "For sure." And he said to him, "Well, if I tell you how to do it, I'm not sure you're going to grow and develop into that great leader." So Arthur said to him, "Well, how can you help?" And Merlin said, "I just need to show you one thing." So Arthur said, "Okay, what?" So he led Arthur to the top of this hill. And he stood at the edge and said to Arthur, he said, "Look down and tell me what you see." So Arthur said, "Okay." He said, "Well, it's obvious. It's the city of Glastonbury." And Merlin said, "Yeah, okay. What do you see in the city of Glastonbury?" And Arthur said, "Well, I look at the market. I can see the sellers selling their products, their clothing and their food. I look in the army barracks. I can see the soldiers cleaning their weapons, ready for the next battle. And in the church, I can see the priests organizing their timetable for this week." So he stepped back and looked at Merlin. He said, "I haven't learned anything. Why are you showing me this?" He said, "You need to look again. In fact, take a step closer to the edge and look a bit closer." So Arthur stepped forward. He peered over the edge and he said, "Yeah, there is something else." He said, "I see another city appearing and it's the city of Avalon." And Merlin said, "Okay, what do you see there?" And he said, "Well, if I look in the market, I can see team spirit, camaraderie, and banter between the traders." He said, "There's competition as well. I look at the families walking around the market and I can see relationship, love, affection." He says, "I look in the army barracks and there's commitment, respect, and trust between the soldiers." He says, "When I look in the church, there's a real sense of faith, hope, and belief." So he stepped back from the edge and Merlin said to him, "What have you seen, Arthur?" And Arthur said, "This is my leadership challenge." He said, "The knights and I, we don't get together anymore because when we did, we just fought. There was no collaboration. We just argued." So Merlin said to him, "Well, what are you going to do?" He said, "Well, I'm going to bring them all together." And that little shopping list that Sally spoke about, these are some of the things that I think I'm going to need to get good at. My leadership challenge is in Avalon. So I'm going to build a round table. I'm going to get all my knights together. But there's going to be rules at this round table. And the rules are going to be very simple, but they're going to be important. There's going to be respect and honour. We're going to listen to each other. And we're going to collaborate together to work out how we achieve the United Kingdom and how we do it together. And we're going to lean into the hostilities. We're going to resolve some of the conflicts, but we will all be champions in Avalon. And I want everyone included. So there will always be an empty seat at my round table for the people from the villages to come in and sit. It's their United Kingdom. So I need to be an inclusive leader. So Merlin helped Arthur build his round table, and then he became his coach and coached him and helped him to develop into the leader that he wanted to be. And then we got the United Kingdom. Even though if we come back to modern day, Scotland appear to be trying to do something about that, but maybe that's another webinar for another day. So let me give you these two cities as perspectives. If you think about your organization, and maybe Lisa or Sally, if we could throw up that slide now, please. So think of these two cities as perspectives. And if you think about your organizations or your team, Glastonbury as a perspective is everything that is in Glastonbury or contained in Glastonbury. Think of them as things that are real and tangible. And what might be examples of those? The buildings, the offices, procedures, processes, structure, products, materials. Probably some of you are sitting at a desk, you're looking into a computer, you've probably got a phone next to you, you're probably surrounded by paperwork. These are the physical assets in your organization. Are they important? Of course they are. Organizations wouldn't exist without this. Arthur saw his challenge was in the city of Avalon, or the Avalon perspective. And Avalon as a perspective is just as real, but these are the invisible, intangible forces at play in organizations and teams. And examples of those are relationships, commitment, emotions, feelings, aspirations. But there are two sides to Avalon. It's not just a positive side, there's a darker side. So there's fear, there's doubt, there's cynicism. And amongst Arthur's knights, there was a lot of hatred, and he had to lean into some of that conflict. And Arthur's challenge as a leader was to be a champion for these things, as well as feeding the country back then in the 5th century. There were many physical things that he was responsible for as king. But if he really wanted to unite the kingdom, which he did, he knew that his big challenge was Avalon and to be a champion in Avalon. And this isn't Glastonbury wrong, Avalon right. Both of these perspectives are critically important. Some organizations say to me, there's no Avalon in our organization. I say to them, really? They say, well, yeah. I said, well, what was your last meeting like? Oh, it was hostile. I said, well, that sounds like Avalon, just not the type that you want. You can't turn Avalon off. You are surrounded by Glastonbury. And Arthur's challenge was to be, as I said, a champion in Avalon. Let me just give you maybe two questions to try and bring particularly the Avalon perspective alive, if I've got time. First one is a personal one. How's your Avalon at work? Put simply, how are you feeling at work? If you're feeling connected to yourself and your environment, i.e. your people around you, your organization's ambition, the challenges that you face on a daily basis, if you've got a healthy connection to those things, then you're probably having a positive impact on the people around you. You're leading effectively. If your Avalon is not so healthy in terms of how you're feeling disconnected with your team, your boss, your subordinates, maybe there's a disconnect there. You don't believe in the organization's ambition or future, or you feel excluded or disconnected from your current issues, you're probably not leading as effectively as you can. And I don't say that as a criticism. I work with many leaders who are disconnected, but want to be connected with their people and their organization. So the first question is, how is your personal Avalon at work? And we've all been disconnected over the last 12 months to probably a greater degree than any of us would want. And my clients are queuing up, wanting me to get them back into a room so they can get connected. So the first question is, how's your Avalon at work? And then the second question, maybe if you set your sights a bit further, what are the most pressing Avalon challenges in either your team or your organization that you can see? What are some of your most pressing Avalon challenges that your organization is facing or in your team? And sometimes taking a step back, kind of pressing the pause button a little bit, helps to try and uncover these, don't forget, invisible challenges. These are the invisible things. And maybe getting a little bit of taking stock of those, as well as your own personal Avalon. And by addressing some of these issues, will either help you and or your organization become more effective at leading, as Arthur found out. But he needed a coach. Sometimes these issues you can't take on your own. You need people around you, whether that's a trusted colleague, whether it's your boss, just sitting with your boss and having an open conversation with them if you feel you can have that. Or sometimes, as people use me, you need someone outside the organization to bring a different objective perspective. And I guess finally, organizations that are only focused on Avalon could be described as pretty soulless places to work. Are they effective? Well, maybe for a period of time, their focus is only on the bottom line. Their focus is only on the tangible things, but it probably doesn't feel great. Similarly, an organization only focused on Avalon might feel great. Every Friday afternoon off, don't worry about the money. We're going bankrupt. It's fine as long as everyone's happy. It's not going to work. Great leaders manage both of these perspectives with equal focus and equal validity. And yet, in my experience of all the years I've been doing this, Avalon seems to go down the list in terms of priorities. If sales are struggling, let's focus on that. If there's a bad relationship in a team, sometimes that takes a little bit longer to address. So, as I said, in closing, the couple of questions I have for you, more rhetorical. How's your Avalon? And how's the Avalon in your team and organization? And addressing these things will help you and your organization become more effective at leading. I think that's about my time slot done. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed, Dominic. Gosh, I think our Avalon is quite good. I just wish our Glastonbury wasn't quite so knackering. I think that's my take on that. I need to speak to Lisa afterwards to see how she's finding Glastonbury and also Avalon. Thank you very much indeed, Dominic. That was inspiring. Next up, we have Sam Leigh from Coalo. But I'm looking at you. You're Managing Director of Lambton Community Services. So where does Coalo, explain a bit where Coalo comes into that, please?
Yeah, of course. Thanks, Ali. So Lambton Community Services is actually quite a newly formed business, and it's come about through the creation of integrating 3, soon to be 4 businesses into one, actually, and thus creating community services. So we work in partnership with the London Borough of Hounslow Council, and we deliver the vast majority of services across the residents to the borough, probably with the exception only of the highways, which is done by Hounslow Highways. So Coalo is there to deliver repairs, maintenance, kitchens, bathrooms, groundworks, construction, refurbishment on all of the properties across the borough. We integrated that with an organisation called Green Space, which is the part of my business that looks after all of our parks, our green spaces, our conservation and our ecology teams. And then lastly, we integrated the third business, which was Lambton Recycle, which are all of the boys in our big lorries that are going around keeping our environmental health and safety at the forefront in regards refuse and recycling pickup. And we have a big depot up at Southall, which is responsible for recycling as much as we possibly can and reducing environmental impact and carbon. So those three businesses coming together have created community services over the last sort of 3-4 months. So we're an organisation now of about 700 employees and growing fast.
Thank you.
Cool. So if it's okay, now this is lethal because Sally and Lisa entrusted me with the technology, which is always a really bad thing to do, but I'm going to try and give it a go.
You can do this.
And I'm hoping that this will work.
You just need to enlarge your screen so we can't see your slides. Yeah.
I will attempt to do that.
There you go. Job done.
And I think I just need to do one last press of the button. There we go. All right, so I'm just going to be a little bit
on the right one. You need to flip it back.
Sorry?
It was already on the right screen. You need to flip it back to the other one.
Oh, okay. Is that the one that says duplicate slide?
No,
Lisa?
the one above. Yeah. There you go. Perfect.
Is that better?
Yes.
Great. Okay. I'm a business leader. I'm not an IT boss, as you can see. All right. So I'm only going to be in about 5-10 minutes, and I'm going to give you a whistle stop tour. So when Sally and Alan asked me to just put together a few slides and present today, it was really around what my take is on leadership. I've been in business now for about 35 years, and I've had the absolute privilege, and I emphasize that because to me, leadership is a privilege. It's not a right that's gifted to people, and it's something that needs to be earned. But also, I think for me, leadership is not about a person. It's actually about a team, and it's about a culture that needs to be created across your organization. And so what I'm sharing with you today in an open and a transparent way is that actually I don't think there's a right way. I don't think that there's a wrong way. I think that there's people's different ways. And actually, I think the whole beauty of leadership is to have and to encourage that diversity and that different thinking into your organisation at the very earliest opportunity that you can. So I'm just going to share with you today a few golden nuggets of things that I've taken through my career that have hopefully helped me to be successful and will continue to do so. So as I said, for me, leadership isn't about a person, it's about a whole group of people coming together, and it's about that team having the responsibility to set the culture, the direction and the vision for the organisation, and to make sure that they communicate that vision and that journey really openly, honestly and transparently with every single person that works as part of that organisation. And of course, that starts with selecting your leadership team. Who do you want around your leadership table? And more importantly, who do you not want around your leadership table? So there are some bold decisions that need to be made here. And I think understanding where you may have individuals that perhaps culturally, behaviourally, they may not fit with the direction of the business that you want to take it in. And I think dealing with those in a really respectful manner, but in a clear, honest and transparent way is absolutely critical in regards to setting out your foundations to your leadership team and to your business. But then I think it's also about, as I've said, really creating an open doorway to diversity and to accepting that actually what you want is you want to create a leadership team around you, which are ultimately very, very different from who you are. I think diversity for me is about understanding that it's not just a word, it's a responsibility and it's an opportunity. And actually, the more diversity you can bring into your leadership team in terms of thinking, culture, ethnicity, all of these different things add to a colourful, creative, innovative leadership team that can then deliver a business that's fit for purpose moving forward in the future. So I'm certainly somebody that when I'm recruiting, I'm all about attitude and aptitude. If you've got the right attitude when you get out of bed in the morning, then I'm really not interested in your capability or your competence, because I'm a firm believer that those things can be developed, they can be trained, they can be taught. but actually your attitude and the aptitude that you bring into work every day. Those are things, those are values that sit within people that really they're either there or they're not, and they're very difficult to be developed. And actually, when I'm looking through, excuse me again, I am recovering from COVID. If you're wondering why, it's not 20 a day fags, I promise you. The reality is that when I'm going through a recruitment process and when I'm going through my CVs, I can't remember the last time I look at an academic or an educational section, because to me, I come from a background, I have literally no education. And part of the reason why I do what I do in the sector that I do is because when I was 17, I was homeless. And so I'm a demonstration that actually, if you've got the right attitude, then everything else can be taught and everything else can be learned. And so to me, again, academia, education, not really interested. I'm more interested in the attitude. And also for me, it's when every time I recruit, for me, that's an opportunity that I can bring somebody into my team who can actually develop me and make me a better leader and give me skills and knowledge that I didn't have before. And so again, it comes back to that point about diversity. But for me, when I'm selecting people that I want to bring into my leadership team, I'm actually overtly trying to find people that are better than me in some shape or form in terms of knowledge, experience, capability, understanding. And in doing so, I'm raising my game as well. So that's just a little bit around selecting your leadership team and the things that I look out for. Once you've got your leadership team, of course, and actually Dominic touched on this a little bit in his presentation, once you've got your leadership team, it's great to understand that you've got all of that talent and all of that capability around your leadership table. But you know, development of leadership is an ongoing skill. It's not a goal, it's not an end journey. It's something that we're constantly developing, evolving, changing and adapting to our environment. And of course, COVID has taught us that we've all had to reinvent ourselves as leaders over the last 12 months, particularly in terms of trying to motivate, inspire, engage and communicate with our virtual colleagues. So for me, I think the first thing I want to say about developing your leadership team is to recognise that you're not it. It doesn't matter what title you're carrying, whether you're the managing director, whether you're the chief executive, whether you're the chair of an organisation, but actually you can't be all things to all people. And actually the most important thing is to recognise around leadership development is to approach it from a sports perspective. So if you've got a real top class, world-class athlete, you won't have one sports coach that is looking after that individual. There will be a team of coaches who are all looking after a developing, growing and getting the best and the optimum performance out of that sports person, because they're all bringing something different to the table. So you'll have somebody who is there who is refining their equipment. You'll have somebody there who is refining their diet. You will have somebody there who is looking after their physical well-being and somebody there who's looking after mental well-being. And so the list goes on. And so sport recognises very, very early on that to get the optimum performance out of people, you need to go and get a diverse set of development coaches and mentors and then bring them in according to the wants and needs of those individuals. So to Dominic's point, I absolutely endorse the fact that in order to really develop your leadership team, you need to identify a team of people that sit around your leadership team with that very purpose and that very goal. And you pull on that according to what you need and when you need it. And then the last thing I wanted to cover today was really just around communication, which of course has been really, really, really prominent and important over the last 12 months. Again, I've got a very diverse workforce. I've probably got the majority of my colleagues are out on the front line, and they really have been on the front line because we've continued to deliver services right the way through the pandemic. And having to take, you know, really considerable time, effort to ensure their health and safety. But behind that is also a support network of staff, ultimately what you would call potentially your back office colleagues. And those people have been working at home for the last 12 months under government directive. And in doing so, some have become very isolated and some have really missed the relationships and the interaction and the camaraderie of being at work. And so I've had to really adapt my approach as a communications leader across the business to try and hit all of those buttons. So the very first thing I would suggest that we all need to do as leaders of our business is lay out your stall. Have a vision, have a mission, have a strategy, and then share it, share it, and share it. Because the reality is that you cannot ever over communicate, and taking the time to lay out your stall so that all of your colleagues know exactly where the business is, where it's going, and what you're going to need to do as an organisation to take it on that journey. Really important. Keep it easy to understand as well. So really adapt your communication to the audience that you're pitching to. So clearly, when I'm rocking up at local London Borough of Hounslow Cabinet to get my business plan signed off, is very different to the way that I'm then relaying those messages when I stand at 5:30 with a shaky cold cup of coffee in my hand on a toolbox talking to my plumbers and my electricians about what that means. So really adapting your style and the content of what you're saying, but making it really easy to understand is important. And then the other things that I've learned during this COVID pandemic is that actually it's really important to keep it regular. And we've actually really upped our ante in regards to communications, because for some, it's the only interaction that they may get during a working week in terms of that update and understanding where the business is at. We've used lots and lots of different channels as well. So virtual, of course, paper, of course, but what we've never really moved away from is the impact that face-to-face can have. Absolutely making sure that we've kept safe, absolutely social distancing, face masks, clean space, and all the rest of it, but actually having boots on the ground and being present with all of our colleagues that are out there on the day-to-day basis has been critical, and has literally been for some the lifeline of communications over the last 12 months. So very lastly, what I also want to say about communications, and again it refers back to what Dominic was saying, is about inclusivity. And again, one of the very biggest mistakes that I think leaders can make around communications is making an assumption about what our colleagues want to hear about. So one of the things that I'm really keen that we always do is setting up those employee forums where we can engage with them directly. We can ask them openly and honestly about what they want to know about and how they want to know about it, and make sure that that communication is two-way. So we have a little bit of a motto in Lambton Community Services, which is "you said, we did." And very clearly that demonstrates that the voice of the colleague and the voice of the customer is coming through, and that we're acting on it. So there you go, Sally, that's me. Whistle-stop tour of everything that I think around the basic principles of leadership.
Thank you very much indeed, Sam. That was interesting. I am quite liking the idea of the employee forum. We as a chamber are going to be getting more interns in, and we still are working remotely. So I think we need to embrace this idea. Ash, over to you. Ash Sanjenbam, who is the founder and director, MD, is that your formal title, of Kingfisher Sec, who deals with security. We've been working with Ash for quite some time now, since last July, on a specific project helping Hounslow Council. We employ marshals to sort of walk around the high streets of the borough to make sure at the beginning of all this they were closing down safely and doing it properly, and now and then opening up. And then there was another bit of a closing down, and then they opened up again. But off we go. And yeah, we built up a really good team, which is no due thanks basically go to Ash, because it's his team. Ash, over to you.
Yes, thank you, Sally. Lisa, if I may, I'm just going to share my slide. One second. Are we seeing this? Okay.
Yeah, all good.
All good, cheers, thank you. Wow, thanks, Sally. And wow, Sam and Dominic, I've just learned that leadership is ever evolving and developing. The last time I ever did a leadership course was at Brunel University about 10 years ago, and I haven't seen anything theoretical ever since. So thank you for sharing those great presentations. And for all here on the webinar today, as Sally mentioned, I'm the founder and the managing director at Kingfisher Sec. We are a security business specializing in security guarding services and events and festival security. I've been in the industry for over a good 17 years. I started off as a business development manager, then went to become the area operations manager. And finally, I started my own business as of today. The company has been trading for over a good 13 years. And within this period, we have had over 1,000 summer casual staff that have gone through our books over these years. And I would like to share a journey on how leadership plays a significant role in hiring and managing a pool of casual staff for short-term contracts and how we did it year on year. So recruitment engagement is one of the most crucial factor for us at the start of any selection procedures. So we normally start this in March of each year to hire for casual summer staff. Hiring over 150 staff to provide for a 5-day festival work deployed in one of Europe's largest music festival and attracting over 180,000 attendees held each year in Somerset in the month of June was just not a momentum task to deliver 150 staff, and selecting the right people was key to us to have a successful contract for the staff to work for 5 days. So during the selection process, it was very key that the message that we were focusing out, the vision that we were laying out, and the branding, we had to get that right, because this message carried all the way through the summer months and was implemented as well. So it was important, and the effective communication to get the right people was very important for us. The art of delegation responsibility, I think Sam mentioned about the fact that you can't do it alone and you need to have the right management team around you. Now, for my business, the right management team with the right credential and experience were key to a successful delivery of a large contract, such as this festival, for a very short period of time. Now, to get these best management team on board, we needed to define the key roles and responsibilities for each manager with targets set right from the start. So once we'd established these functions, we then monitored using a very simple key performance indicator matrix and working within the timeline for them to achieve these targets. Why do we do this? It's crucial for our contracts, as on this particular festival, we are tasked to provide security and safety of the external perimeter of the festival. This fence line, which a lot of people know at this festival, is about a 7-mile radius. And we have responsibility for the festival to deploy 150 staff. So we needed the right key managers and the team to ensure we deployed and at these 150 staff to fulfill the contract. So you can't do it alone. You'll always need a team behind you to fulfill any project or services you offer. So the other bit I want to stress is on effective communication. You may have employed and selected 150 staff, but these people need to be inducted and trained for the job and task for them. So in some of the induction, and I think this is coming down to the Avalon bit where we're connecting with staff and understanding the emotions, and from the employer's point of view to the employee's point of view. So induction was key. We got to know them a bit better. And in this induction, we will be speaking to them about the specific jobs and responsibilities that they'll be carrying out at this festival. And from very basic things such as availability of facilities, their welfare. Remember, we are working in a field. There's no solid infrastructure overhead. We're in a field. So induction was important, and training on their health and safety was important for us. So we connected with them. The second point I want to mention is about their welfare and a duty of care as a responsible employers. At the festival, we deployed day shifts and night shifts 24 hours around the clock for 5 days. We needed to ensure that the staff, when deployed in their positions, were looked after. So we had to deploy support welfare management team to look after those staff. So, and also ensuring that they were carrying out their duties. So it's important, if you're in your business, you need to take care of your staff. In our service sector, where we are outside of the festival and events work, we are promising a service to our customers. It is the staff that deploy these services. So you should have some sort of a system in ensuring your staff are looked after in those customers' premises or where the services are delivered. Specifically during the pandemic, as Sam mentioned, there was a lot of us also in our industry that worked in the front line. We created welfare management virtual meetings where we couldn't get to those sites. We continued on a weekly, fortnightly basis and kept in touch with every single staff in our other contracts, which we specialize in. For instance, the empty buildings we look after, or any other retail when retail was up as well. So we go on those sites. We always took care of the staff on duty. So coming back to the festival, I actually got this slide from a LinkedIn colleague of mine, and I thought this was good. Personally, as a leader, one needs to show how the job is done. For me, I've worked at this festival for over a dozen of times. So I know exactly the layout of the festival, each and every position that we as security were covering, and the roles and responsibility that attached to it. So as a leader, I would go and speak to them and spend time with them, have a coffee in their positions, and have a general banter, ensuring at the same time they were looked after and that they were carrying out their duties safely. So for your businesses as a leader, you need to understand and have the fundamental knowledge of your trade and services that you offer, that you then show it to your staff. Moving on, again, Sam mentioned about teamwork. This is a slide that photo that I took a couple of years ago. You will see that every single one of my staff there are smiling. This is even after 3 days of a downpour in sunny Somerset over the festival period, yet they're still smiling. And I want to refer this back to why they're smiling is because we as an employer gave them all the information required to prepare for any eventuality to work at the festival. So they were ready to meet that. So it goes down back to the communication. Your communication right from the top to the bottom is key in all stages of your business. And yeah, so this is, I can only end by saying you can't do it alone. A happy team is the only way to a successful delivery of a project or services for your customers. And on this note, I'll end and I'll pass it back to Sally.
Thank you very much indeed, Ash. Thank you. It's the festival that must not be named, isn't it? Alan, we're sort of the Hounslow Chamber bread of the sandwich. Over to you, Alan.
Okay, this is where I get the fun bit. I've listened to all the presentations. I could ask some questions now. My background, for everybody to know on the webinar, is I've been in export for most of my life. I've worked for some very large companies, and I've also worked for some very small companies and helped be part of a team that built up a small company from 10 people to 350, which was quite an achievement over a number of years in multiple countries. So I get what a lot of this is really all about. Ash, as you were the last speaker, I'll ask you a first question. What have you learnt about delivering the Safer Business Hounslow project across the borough and interaction with some of our lovely shopkeepers and businesses across the borough? Because when your people go into those shops and have those pictures taken with them, they all seem to be smiling and everybody seems to be enjoying what they're doing, which is quite an achievement going through a pandemic and the worst economic recession that we've all managed to been through in perhaps our lifetimes. And yet you seem to have your workforce out there and our team out there supporting you and your team with big smiles. And there's lots of happiness coming back from them.
I can only say, Alan, from the start of the COVID, we had to look at different ways and diversify. And very fortunate for us at the time where there was no events or festival last year, we were very fortunate to be awarded this contract with the Safer Business Hounslow. So the team had to diversify their knowledge of doing a normal security to becoming now a business support manager. There was a little bit of Avalon mix to this, Dominic. We understood the emotions of not just the people that we were sending out to help and support the retail businesses, But it was important that they were confident, that they knew, understood what knowledge they had to have to deliver those services. And our boys connected with the retailers, understanding their emotions as well at the same time, and offering all the help and support the council and the government guidelines were providing for these businesses to open up. So in terms of the team out there, the motivational factor was they were more interactive. There was a lot more interaction from the businesses in Hounslow. There were positive feedbacks coming in. I would say 99% of the feedback and reports that we get back to the Safer Business Hounslow were positive in the sense that there was an effective communication between our boys and the retail outlets out there, and we were feeding back their issues and challenges back into the Safer Business Owners to be passed on to the council. So the staff was motivated, they were happy to engage, and mind you, this was all in the midst of a pandemic. So we didn't really know what the outcome was going to be. And the human nature came out and delivered the service to the best we could.
Superb. And Dominic, perhaps I can ask you a question about, you've traveled around the world giving leadership presentations and encouragement to companies in perhaps every continent of the planet. How have you found, we're a very multicultural borough, how have you found cultural issues affect the way how businesses are run on a leadership level? Your Avalon story is very familiar with us. How does that go down when you take it abroad? How does that travel?
One of the mistakes I continue to run into with some of the big multinational organizations that I work with, one of them on the Great West Road, the big building that will remain nameless as an example. I work with that level, at that size of business, and I work with small ones as well. They're very good at starting a behavioural initiative from Holland, from Brentford, from somewhere in Europe where most of these big multinationals tend to be based. They're very good at starting it there. Their ability to communicate and understand how that brief lands in China or Japan or South Korea seems to be somewhat limited. And the specific work that I do on leadership development and culture change at that multicultural level is helping those European global businesses land their initiative, their behavioral initiative in the right way, said in the right way, embracing the local culture. For example, there was a Dutch company that I work with, a big business. They had 3 cultural values that they created, and one of them they used, and they said, let's have a behavior week. So this particular behavior, they communicated around the world. The language that they used landed very differently in places like China and Japan and places like that, and they didn't know that, they didn't understand it. When they did this company, they do a top management conference every year. They take their top 350 managers, and for the last 10 years, one year it would be in the US, the next year it would be in Europe somewhere. The CEO decided to do it in China for once. This was about 2 years ago, and there were 350 of his top managers in the room, and he asked them all to stand up. And he said, if you've never been to China before, please sit down. There were 4 people remain standing in the room, and yet China was one of their biggest markets. So it just goes to show the lack of cultural awareness of some of these multinationals who kind of start initiatives in Europe that have a global reach. And I don't think they do it on purpose, it's just their naivety. I was told once when I was my first time I ran a session in Japan, the leader spoke, And I said to the group, there was 15 people in the room, what do you think of what he said? Now I ask that question in Holland, I get 15 answers immediately. In Japan, I asked the question, there was silence. So I thought, okay, let me ask that again. So in typical British fashion, I spoke a bit louder. That still didn't work until the HR director whispered in my ear, said to me, Dominic, why don't you ask people individually? You're then showing them a sign of respect, which they then will appreciate. So I asked someone individually and they spoke. And there's these little cultural nuances that as organizations, if you want to change culture globally, you have to be sensitive to them, critical, because most countries in Asia will not say no. They'll nod or say yes and do something different because it's not in their culture to challenge the European bosses, for example. So yeah, I don't know if that was an answer to your question, but culture is a diverse thing. You've got organizational culture and then you've got to try and land it locally, which is where the bigger challenge is.
I thought it was very funny. You go to South Korea and the nearest you'll get to no is that might not be possible.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah.
Sam, can I ask, Lambton 360 is a very interesting company trying to do incredibly difficult things for a very good reason inside a developing and changing borough. It changed its name to Coalo, and you're now the CEO there. Have you had challenges reaching down to all 700 of your workforce? And how do you sort of get down and drill down so that your message, your good message of involvement and having the right aptitude and attitude, how do you manage to resonate that through with all three, I was going to say 360 degrees of your business, but with all of your 700 staff?
Yeah, thanks, Alan. I mean, I think for me, it comes back to a little bit of what I was talking about earlier on, which is I think once I'd assembled my leadership team, the very first thing that we had to settle on was a very, very clear vision of where we wanted Lambton Community Services to go. What was our end goal? What was our destination? And it was further complicated. I mean, that, you know, setting a vision and a strategy, it's what business leaders do, but it can't be underestimated. It's you know, quite a big piece of work to undertake. But it was further complicated by the fact that we've got a dual role to play within our business. The first is that we are here to serve the residents across Hounslow Borough, and therefore our strategy, our vision absolutely has to align to that of the council, because otherwise we're juxting up against the very people that we're here to serve. So creating a strategy and a vision which is innovative, engaging, different, commercial, but also doesn't fundamentally differentiate itself away from the client, that's quite a big challenge. And so the way that we did that was to bring our colleagues in right at the very beginning of that journey. So we ran a series of workshops, and everyone was invited to come along and have an opinion and have a view and input as to what they thought that should be, could be, and would be. And so very early on from the creation of that vision and strategy, if you were a colleague and you had a voice and you had something to say, then you were encouraged to come forward and put into the planning stage. Once we'd got a vision and we've got a strategy and we've got a clear direction of travel, then I think what we then talked about was, how do we bring that to life? Well, okay, you can write a strategic document and all of the great things that go in that, yawn. They're really important, you know, finance and risk and resources and all of that good stuff are really critical to a business. And that's the type of thing that I would take to the cabinet. But in terms of my staff and my colleagues that I work with, it was about story. And I think for me, that's what leaders have to be good at. They have to be good at telling a story. And so realistically, again, it's just about using those different channels. So we used workshops like this. We used vlogs so that as I was running around the borough in the freezing cold back in the winter and the spring months, I was just recording on my phone and just sending messages out instantaneously to all the colleagues that could then log on and keep up to date. Newsletters are still, we can't get away from the fact that a lot of my colleagues don't have connectivity or they choose not to. And so walking into the depots and seeing the posters up and knowing that there's going to be a poster up every week with an update from Sam draws them in so that they can read and they can understand what's going on. And then, of course, very lastly, I have to say, boots on the ground. It's really important. And again, seeing the chief exec rock up in a high vis with steel toe cap boots on, prepared to be there at 5:30 in the morning with a bacon butty, and just telling the story as it is. That to me is really how you communicate and engage with your colleagues. And it comes a little bit back to what Ash is saying, which is, a leader needs to know how to do the job. And so, the fact, if I can be bothered to rock up in the freezing cold, in the dark, and tell the story, then that's what colleagues really, that's what they really like, and that's what they buy into.
Superb. What a great story. It really is. Sally,
Yes,
do you have hobnail boots and a high-vis jacket for our next board meeting?
yes, I do. In actual fact, yeah, I've got my dicky boots. Right, a quick question that somebody actually put into the registration box. Okay, what new leadership traits are needed to inspire a changing workforce which is younger and inconsistent and a less committed generation? Now, I think this person is being a tad judgmental, but I don't know. Ash, what are your thoughts? I mean, obviously you have to get your 150 sort of staff just to work for 5 days. Do you find them less committed than previously?
Yes and no, because we work with lots of young people, especially university students that come to work in some of our festivals. I think the key thing is, the brand has to work for the company they work for and inspire them to work in a festival, big name festival. So I think it really plays a key role on where they will be working for, who they'll be working for, who they are. So that key message has to really be clear, and that vision of the company and the customer has to be communicated to these young people. And most importantly, if you can show the young people that there's growth within your own business or in the sector that they are starting to work in, and if you can educate them within that sector where you trade in, you create inspiration for them to further along after their studies or get into that line of work. So again, it's all down to communication and ensuring that person is motivated right from the time they come into the selection process, work, and then carry it on. I mean, we have so many number of staff that come every single year back to work on various festivals or events.
Thank you for that. Sam, have you any thoughts about that? Workforce being less motivated than previously?
I can't say I've seen that. No, I mean, I think it's like all things. I think the COVID pandemic has been dreadful for a lot of reasons to a lot of people. There's been a lot of loss, and there's been a lot of pain, and there's been a lot of negativity, of course, around COVID. And the media are very good about reminding us about that every single day. But actually, there is another side to COVID, and I think that there's some positivity that's come out of it as well, which maybe doesn't get the same amount of media because it doesn't sell as many newspapers. But actually what it has done is it's reminded people of localism, and it's reminded people about the importance of relationships, and it's reminded people about the importance of community. And I actually think that what I found with the vast majority of my colleagues is that they've really, really stepped into that space. And actually, I think it's reinvigorated my staff, if I'm absolutely honest. They are petrified, don't get me wrong. It's been really hard over the last 12 months, especially when your leadership team has been told to stay at home and work virtually. and then your workforce are out on the front line. So I'm not sugarcoating this. There have been moments of divided workforce where it has felt at times a bit them and us. You know, it's all very well you sat there in your cozy house and we're out fighting and on the front line, literally. It's not all been sugarcoated. But the fact remains is that we've got through it, or we're getting through it, and we got through it as a team and as a business, and we kept delivering. And actually, I think customers have really, really, really appreciated it. So I don't see that. I don't see a lesser committed workforce. I see a much more committed and involved and community connected workforce is what I'm seeing.
Thank you for that. Dominic, do you want to have the final word?
Well, about that in particular, I don't think people are less motivated. I think, particularly if you look at some of the younger generation, their motivation horizons are a lot closer. So one of the big multinationals I work with, a guy's just retired, and it was a one company career. I think that's going to become a very distant thing of the past. Young people want to move on. And I don't think it's because they get demotivated. They're just a lot more opportunistic. And I'll share with you a story that showed the gap between a board and some young people, some of their employees. It was a well-known supermarket chain here in the UK. We did a session with the board a few years ago, and part of the workshop, they invited some of their younger employees to come in and talk about what it was like in their shoes. And it was fascinating. I mean, the board, the location that they picked was, I don't know if people know, Beamish Open Air Museum up in the Northeast. And they picked the old boardroom to have the 2-day session in. I mean, you had these oak paneled walls. It was fascinating. Anyway, these guys walked in and just bamboozled the board about what it was like being in a 22-year-old shoes. And one of the most memorable differences was the board called these things mobiles, and the younger people called them phones. And it was just to see this difference unfold. So yeah, I don't think it's a lack of motivation. As I said, I think the motivation horizons are a lot shorter and people are moving around a lot quicker. My son's in recruitment and they get jobs, they get asked to fill jobs all the time. Yeah.
Thank you very much indeed. I see we've gone a little bit over, but as usual, a fascinating discussion. Thank you so much to our panel. I do send out a great number of emails. Please do read them. There are more webinars coming up. We have one tomorrow morning on digitalization of your business. There's a Fit to Bid webinar on the 7th of June. And then there's a webinar on the hybrid working model, home and office. That's on the 9th of June. So an awful lot. Oh, on the 10th of June, options facing liquidation or insolvency. A bit of a sad one, that one. But yeah, please do come along to as many as you can. They're on our YouTube channel, so they're recorded all the time. So if you can't actually come along, you can catch up later on. Again, thank you very much indeed for our panelists. Really interesting discussion, and keep safe and hopefully see you in the flesh soon.
Thank you all, everybody.
Yeah.
Really good to see you and listen to you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Thanks, bye.